Warning, this content may be disturbing to some audiences. Subscribe, if you dare. It was just me and my mom, and the whole time I kept thinking about my little sister, and how she was going to have to grow up without a mom. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. Redditors who have survived a plane crash, how did people react on the way down? Number 1. I was pretty young, only about 4 or 5, when I was in a plane crash. It was a small one-engine prop plane with just me, my dad, and the pilot who was a family friend. It was caused by engine failure. I don't remember much except my dad's actions. He was sitting in the front co-pilot seat. He reached back to me in the back seat and pulled my winter coat snug around me. It was winter in Cleveland, Ohio. Then he made sure my seatbelt was fastened securely. After making sure I was safe, he buckled himself in tightly as well. It is important to note at this point that my dad is a devout Christian. He said that he was quiet and praying that God would allow his son to live, even if he didn't. Both my dad and the pilot were knocked unconscious on impact, and both severely injured. Dad regained consciousness first and heard me crying in the back of the plane. He told me that his first thoughts were a mix of panic and relief. He panicked, thinking the pilot was probably dead and he has to get out of the wreckage, but he has some relief because my crying meant I was alive. In the end, all three of us best the odds and survived. Number 2. My boss one summer was in a plane crash with the Cessna her husband was piloting, and she said it was a just calm reaction because there's stuff to do and you don't want to distract the pilot. She also told me if ever in a plane crash, the reason they tell you brace position isn't so much the initial impact, you either survive that or don't, but rather you're probably in for a really rough landing of many bumps. And she broke a few ribs on the second or third one from not grabbing around her knees strongly enough. Number 3. Captain came on and says we had lost our left engine, large passenger plane with only 2 huge engines, and we will be forced to make an emergency landing in Iceland. Engine on the left then starts spewing fuel/oil all over the windows of the fuselage, and those of us who were awake couldn't believe our eyes. The captain then says, and I shit you not, he will be forced to land with the power of only one engine and that he had done this in the simulator before. Once. That's the last we heard from him, and as all the passengers on the plane began to wake up, others who had been asleep tried to explain what happened. I started writing a note to my family and other people were praying out loud but generally very quiet. We made it to Iceland, had a shaky but successful landing, and that's the first and only time I've been to Iceland. Number 4. I was in a helicopter crash. Everyone was silent during the ordeal other than the pilot. We were coming down from a mountain cabin flying by sight when fog rolled in. The pilot started swaying left and right to find something to get a bearing in the whiteout, and he found something: the trees. I will never forget going from total dizzying whiteness to cedar tree branches pressed up against the plexi window, the sound of chop chop chop, the smell of Christmas, smelled like fresh cut Christmas tree I swear, and then the loudest horn ever and a big red light on the dash that said stall. I was in co-pilot seat. Somehow we managed to spot a rock by the lake and the pilot slammed it down hard, but amazingly nobody hurt, and the smoke from the engine never turned to flame. We were damn lucky. Number 5. I was in a commercial jet that fell from cruising altitude. It was a small jet flying on a now defunct airline. We had just started the descent when the plane tilted and dropped out of the sky. Nose was pointed nearly straight down. I was sitting in the aisle. People were screaming, yelling out, but I can't remember the words. All kinds of crap was flying through the cabin and the flight attendant was nowhere to be seen. My brother and dad were in the seats behind me. I remember thinking about how sad my mom was going to be. After what seemed like an eternity, the pilot was able to regain control and the plane started to right itself again, for about 15 to 30 seconds, before starting another uncontrolled descent. It was more terrifying the second time around. I was certain that I was going to die and looked over at a blonde woman about my age sitting next to me. We hadn't spoken the entire flight, but I reached out in some impulsive desire for human contact at the end, and we held hands as the plane fell out of the sky. As the ground started approaching and you could make out things like trees and houses, I felt a sense of peace fall about me. Death seemed to be certain, but I didn't care. It seemed like it was going to be quick and painless, but I remember being surprised that it was going to all end this way. Then we started to feel the pilot struggling with the plane and it started to right itself again, and for a second time the plane pulled out of the dive. When we landed, the young woman and I were still holding hands. People were dead quiet. Some people scream and panic in those last few minutes. Others seem to accept the inevitable. In the moment it seems like there isn't much that you can do, it's all in the pilot's hands. I hate flying now. Number 6. I was in a large airplane flying into Hong Kong. It just kept dropping and then leveling out, over and over again. I heard crying and talking. I was sitting in a window seat on the left side of the plane. I looked up at my dad on the right and he just calmly smiled at me. Not a trace of fear on his face at all. You'd think that'd be reassuring, but I was so scared. Nothing in the world could have made me feel safe in that moment. I was probably 16 at the time, and to this day I avoid flying at all costs. It has probably stopped me from experiencing a lot of things in life, but that's just how I am now. Number 7. I've been in 3 plane crashes, mostly on the runway. My dad has been in many more. 2 in one day. Once, granted one of them he was in a helicopter. Part of the territory growing up around bush planes. The most memorable was in a de Havilland DHC-3 single otter on floats. Happened on takeoff. The engine was spooling up and we started to work our way on step when a massive gust of wind picked us straight up into the air about 60 to 100 feet and dropped us. Ended up landing on the left side of the plane. Everyone was a little shook up, but the real danger was that the plane was sinking now. Another guy popped the roof escape hatch and started pulling people up on top. Luckily this happened right around dinner time on a busy lake. Many boats came by to assist and nobody was injured. One guy's pants got wet and the airline's owner bought him new ones. There's not really much to say what I'd actually do with my last minutes of any given crash. It all kind of happens and is over before you know what's going on. It's a little different when you're up front, but even then, unless you're actively on the controls, you can't do anything. Just accept it and be ready to act when the tumbling is over. Number 8. Plane didn't crash, but I sure as hell thought it was going to. I was flying back from Colorado back home to New Jersey. Plane started to descend quickly in the middle of the flight. Everyone looks around confused. Flight attendant is talking to someone on the phone PA system, then immediately sprints to her seat and buckles in. Oxygen mask drop down. More confusion, then everyone freaks out and puts the masks on. Plane is still dropping quickly. I look around to see kids are crying. I see an older couple holding hands and a man listening to something on his headphones. Apparently there is a channel on the radio where you can listen in on the captain's radio. I listen in and hear the captain refer to all of us as 100-something souls on board. I think that was the scariest part for some reason. I'm sure it's normal to refer to people as souls, but in that context it was haunting. Ended up having to emergency land in Chicago. Never found out why the plane malfunctioned, but we all got free drinks on the next flight. Number 9. A friend of mine took me up in a borrowed Aranca Champ, which is similar to a J3 Cub. Flight was totally fine and fun. However, on landing the pilot's airspeed on final was tilde 70 miles per hour with a right crosswind of tilde 10 miles per hour. We touched down at 60 miles per hour on the left main first. The right wing immediately came up, pushing the left wing within inches of the pavement. This caused the airplane to make an immediate 90-degree turn where we bounded through a snowbank and off into a field. As soon as the aircraft started to ground loop, my only thoughts were to brace for impact, covering my vital torso with my arms, thinking this is going to hurt and I hope I do not get impaled. After making it out okay, I helped him dig the plane out of the snowbank and get it started again, and then, like the idiot I am, hopped back in and went for another ride around the pattern to let him redeem himself. I am currently a student pilot, but have been flying with my parents since I was 8 days old. Number 10. I was flying with a friend in northern Minnesota and had to make an emergency landing in a field. It was windy, and as he was making the descent, gusty wind screwed him up and came down angled. When we came down, he cut his face on the console or stick and was out of it. I was fine, got out of the plane, pulled my friend out, and we grabbed the go back from the storage area. Tried our cell phones, but his had a cracked screen, bad, and mine got no service. He had called on the radio before the crash, and had told the emergency services guy that we were making an emergency landing. I got on the radio and called that we just crashed and my friend was hurt badly. National Guardsmen had to come get us. I wasn't so scared when he told me that we would have to make a landing, but was nervous. I had the jitters and had my eyes on my feet the whole time. When he told me the wind was too strong, I got scared. He couldn't get the nose back up and told me to brace. I had my hands on both sides of the plane, it was tandem style seating, and started praying. Number 11. I was in an almost plane crash, on a flight from Newark to Istanbul. Something didn't feel right as we were boarding, but I think because the flight next to us had just been cancelled, they got us on board and hoped for the best. Anywho, about 1.5 hours over the Atlantic Ocean, something seems off. Then the pilot comes on saying there is a mechanical issue and then are not sure what's going on, but to prepare for a water landing. Everyone is confused and it was dead quiet. It was also nighttime, so some people were asleep. Flight attendants start wandering the aisles more and more frequently, making us more worried since we had no idea what was going on and we didn't hear from the captain. Hostesses instruct people to follow safety instructions. By this point, everyone is awake, as far as I can tell. According to people I talked to afterwards, one flight attendant went and sat down and put her face in her arms. Another one apparently told someone that people don't usually survive water landings. It was just me and my mom, and the whole time I kept thinking about my little sister, and how she was going to have to grow up without a mom. It was pretty terrifying, but you would be amazed at how quiet the cabin was. After the worst turbulence I ever felt in my life, and the most silence I have ever experienced, we were able to make an emergency landing in Newfoundland. And that's the story of the first and only time I've ever been to Canada. Make sure to share your personal story in the comments below and have the opportunity to be featured in a future video. Also, if you like these topics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button to continue seeing more content like this every day. See you next time.